She entered the world with no promise waiting for her, no celebration, no safety, no voice. She was born into a system that measured her worth by ownership, a system that decided her future before she could open her eyes, a system that believed her pain was normal and her silence was necessary. Her birth name was Isabella Baumfree. She was born in New York, a land that spoke of freedom while holding chains behind closed doors. She was born enslaved, not knowing the meaning of the word, only knowing the feeling of being controlled, of being watched, of being afraid. As a child, she learned fear before language, she learned hunger before comfort, she learned loss before love. She was taken from her parents while still young, not gently, not with explanation, but with force. Her family was torn apart in moments, as if love meant nothing, as if blood bonds were invisible. She was sold, then sold again, then sold again. Each time she was passed from one owner to another, a piece of her was left behind. Each good bye carved a deeper wound. She spoke Dutch, not English, and because of that she was punished, beaten for misunderstanding, whipped for confusion, silenced for being different. Her childhood was not soft. It was heavy, it was violent, it was lonely. She worked fields meant for grown bodies. She carried burdens meant for men. She endured cruelty meant to break spirits. Many nights she cried alone, not knowing if anyone could hear, not knowing if anyone cared, yet something inside her survived. Something refused to disappear. As she grew older, the pain changed shape, but it did not leave. She was forced into labor, every day forced into obedience, forced into submission. She was forced into marriage without choice, without consent. She became a mother, and motherhood under slavery carried its own torture. Love a child while knowing that child could be sold to hold a baby, while knowing someone else claimed ownership. That pain lived deep inside her chest. One of her sons was taken from her, sold, illegally ripped away. While she cried out, no one listened, no one intervened. That moment changed her forever. Fire was lit inside her, a fire fueled by injustice, by grief, by rage, by love. She prayed not polite prayers, not quiet prayers. She spoke to God with honesty, with desperation, with tears. She believed God could hear slaves even if the world refused to. Years passed, and the weight became unbearable. Then one day she chose herself. In 1826, she walked away from slavery. She did not run into the night. She did not hide in shadows. She walked into uncertainty with faith as her only protection. Freedom was frightening. It meant risk, it meant hunger, it meant vulnerability, but it also meant choice. She worked for food, worked for shelter, worked for survival. For the first time, her labor belonged to her, yet her son was still enslaved, and she refused to accept that freedom for herself was enough. She did something unheard of. She went to court, a formerly enslaved black woman standing in a legal system built to exclude her. She spoke, she fought, she refused to back down against all odds. She won. She became the first black woman in American history to win a court case against a white man. Her son was returned to her. In that moment, something powerful shifted. She realized her voice mattered. She realized truth could stand up to power. Years later, she felt a calling, a deep spiritual command, one she could not ignore. She believed she was meant to travel, to speak, to testify. She left her old name behind. Isabella Baumfree belonged to chains, to ownership, to survival. She chose a new name, Sojourner, truth sojourner, because she would walk truth, because she would speak. She walked from town to town, village to village, sharing her story. She had no education, could not read, could not write, but her voice carried weight because it carried lived experience. She spoke of slavery, of cruelty, of faith, of justice. People listened, some with admiration, some with fear, some with hatred. Men challenged her, mocked her, tried to silence her. They said women were weak. They said women belonged in the home. They said women should not speak publicly. Sojourner stood firm. She spoke of working fields, of lifting loads, of enduring pain. She spoke of childbirth, of loss, of survival. She reminded them that strength did not belong to one gender. In 1851, she attended a women's rights convention. The room was filled with debate, with doubt, with prejudice. She listened. Then she stood, a black woman, formerly enslaved, standing before a nation. She spoke simply, powerfully. She spoke of her life, of her labor, of her womanhood. She asked a question that changed history. Ain't I a woman? That question shattered illusions, exposed hypocrisy, demanded recognition. No one could deny it. She was a woman, and her womanhood carried strength, endurance, dignity. From that moment, her words traveled far beyond the room. She became a symbol of truth. But symbols face resistance. She was attacked, accused, discredited. People questioned her past, her identity, her humanity. She endured. She continued speaking, continued walking, continued believing. During the Civil War, she worked as a nurse, as a recruiter, as a guide. She supported the Union fought for freedom. She met President Lincoln, a woman once owned standing beside power. She reminded the nation that freedom incomplete was not freedom at all. As years passed, her body aged but her spirit remained unbroken. She never stopped believing that truth could heal, that justice mattered, that voices once silenced deserved to be heard. She lived a life shaped by suffering, but defined by courage. She was born a slave, but she spoke like a queen, and her voice still echoes. This is only the beginning. She did not wake up famous. She did not wake up celebrated. When Sojourner Truth walked the roads of America, she walked into danger, into suspicion, into hatred. Every step she took challenged a system that depended on silence. She was a black woman, tall, unapologetic, unknown. That alone frightened people. She traveled with nothing but faith, sometimes bare, but sometimes hungry, sometimes alone. She slept where she was allowed, and sometimes where she was not wanted. She spoke in churches, on streets, in halls filled with men who believed women should not speak. Her voice was calm, but it carried fire. She did not beg. She did not soften the truth to make it easier to swallow. She told people what slavery really looked like, what it felt like, what it stole. She spoke of mothers losing children, of bodies breaking under labor, of souls being treated as property. Many people could not handle her honesty. They interrupted her, tried to shout her down, tried to scare her into silence. Some said she was too loud. Some said she was too strong. Some said she was not a real woman. She stood there unmoved. She had plowed fields. She had lifted loads. She had survived beatings. She had given birth in pain, and she knew exactly who she was. She reminded them that womanhood was not weakness, that softness was not submission, that strength did not belong only to men. She spoke with authority, not borrowed, earned in towns. She visited crowds gathered. Some came to listen, some came to mock, some came to threaten. There were nights she was followed, moments she was warned to leave, rooms where hatred sat heavy in the air. Yet she stayed. She believed fear had ruled her life long enough. Her faith anchored her. She believed God walked with her, protected her, guided her, even when stones were thrown, even when insults were shouted, even when doors were slammed. She continued. Her words reached abolitionists, women, activists, freedom seekers. She stood beside other voices for justice, even when they did not always stand beside her. Racism followed her even in reform movements. Sexism followed her even among abolitionists. Still, she stayed true to her mission. She refused to choose between fighting for black freedom or women freedom. She knew injustice did not exist in pieces. It existed as a whole. During the Civil War, the nation was tearing itself apart. Blood soaked the land. Families divided. Ideals tested. Sojourner did not retreat. She stepped forward. She worked in camps, cared for wounded soldiers, comforted the dying. She helped recruit black men to fight, men once enslaved, now asked to defend a country that had not defended them. She spoke to them with honesty, with pride, with resolve. She reminded them that their fight mattered, that their courage would change history. She challenged leaders, demanded better treatment for black soldiers. She did not whisper her demands. She carried them directly to power. She met Abraham Lincoln, a woman once enslaved, standing in the White House. History bent quietly in that moment. She did not bow. She did not shrink. She spoke as an equal, as a witness to truth. After the war, freedom was declared, but equality was not delivered. Sojourner saw the gap, felt it, lived it. She spoke against segregation, against violence, against broken promises. She fought for land, for freed slaves, believing independence required ownership, not charity. She fought for voting rights, knowing voices mattered. As she aged, her body slowed. But her purpose did not. Her face carried years of struggle. Her eyes carried clarity. She had lived many lives, enslaved, escaped, awakened, respected, yet she never forgot where she came from. She never allowed comfort to dull her truth. Even near the end, she spoke when invited. And when not invited, she reminded America of its unfinished work. When she passed, she left no wealth, no titles, no possessions of value. But she left something greater, a legacy, a voice that could not be erased. She proved that truth spoken with courage can outlive chains, that dignity cannot be owned, that a woman once silenced can change a nation. Her journey did not end with her breath. It continued in every woman who stood up, in every voice that refused to be quiet, in every soul that chose truth over fear. She was born a slave. She lived a warrior. She spoke like a queen, and her story still walks among us. Time moved forward, but the weight of the past never left her. Sojourner Truth carried memory like a second skin. Every road she walked held echoes. Every crowd reminded her of rooms where she once had no place. America was changing, But slowly, too slowly, freedom had been declared, yet chains still existed, some visible, some hidden behind laws and habits. Sojourner saw it clearly. She saw black families pushed aside, she saw women ignored, she saw promises spoken loudly and forgotten quietly, and she refused to let the nation forget. She spoke wherever people gathered, markets, church steps, public squares. She spoke to those who agreed, and to those who hated her presence. She told them freedom without dignity was not freedom, that laws without justice were empty. Her voice had aged, but it had deepened like a river that knows its path. People recognized her now, some with respect, some with fear. She was no longer just a woman speaking. She was a reminder of pain, of courage, of unfinished work. She challenged the government, openly demanded land. Freed people believed that without land, freedom would collapse under poverty. She believed independence required ground beneath one's feet, a place to stand, a place to build. Many dismissed her, called her unrealistic, called her dangerous. She had heard worse before she spoke for women, insisting their voices mattered in shaping the future. She spoke for Black Americans, demanding safety, opportunity, recognition. She spoke for the poor, for the displaced, for those history tried to erase. She never softened her truth to make it comfortable. At times she stood alone, even allies stepped back when her words grew too sharp, but she had never been afraid of standing alone. She had been alone in slavery, alone in escape, alone in court. Solitude did not frighten her. What frightened her was silence. As the years passed, her body weakened, her steps slowed, her hands trembled, but her presence remained powerful. When she spoke, people leaned in, not because she was loud, but because she was real. Children listened to her stories, young women watched her strength, men measured themselves against her courage. She became a living bridge between the past and the future. She told stories not to relive pain, but to prevent its return. She wanted the next generation to know what had been endured, what had been overcome, what still needed to change. She reminded them that freedom is not a gift, it is a responsibility, that justice must be protected, or it will disappear. She lived simply, without luxury, without comfort. Her wealth was purpose. Her home was wherever truth was needed. Near the end of her life, she reflected quietly. She had been born owned, yet died unowned. She had been silenced, yet became a voice the nation could not ignore. She had been denied humanity, yet forced the world to recognize it. She did not call her life easy, she called it meaningful. When death came, it came gently. She left the world without fear, knowing she had spoken, knowing she had walked, knowing she had obeyed her calling. She was laid to rest, but her work was not buried. Her words continued, her question continued. Ain't I a woman? The question still waits for answers, in every generation, in every struggle, in every voice rising against injustice. Sojourner Truth did not ask for perfection. She asked for honesty. She did not ask for praise. She asked for equality. She did not ask to be remembered, yet she could not be forgotten. Her life reminds us that truth spoken with courage becomes eternal, that a woman once enslaved can reshape history, that even in a world built to silence you, your voice can still change everything. Her journey continues in every woman who stands tall, in every soul that chooses truth, and the story is not over. Yet the world moved on, new faces, new voices, new struggles, but the spirit she carried did not fade. Sojourner Truth became more than a memory. She became a presence, a quiet force that lived inside the conscience of a nation. Long after her footsteps disappeared from the roads, she walked. Her words continued to travel. They moved through classrooms, through protest lines, through whispered conversations between mothers and daughters. America tried to define progress, tried to celebrate change, tried to believe the work was done. But her voice reminded them not yet. Her life exposed a truth that could not be erased, that freedom without equality is fragile, that justice delayed is justice denied. Women carried her story forward. Black women, especially, they saw themselves in her strength, in her endurance, in her refusal to bow. They recognized the cost she paid, and the door she forced open when women demanded the right to vote. Her question stood beside them, a silent witness when Black Americans marched for civil rights. Her courage walked with them. She had shown what it meant to speak without permission, to exist without apology. Her image appeared in books, in speeches, in art, but more important than her image was her message. She had insisted on being seen, on being counted, on being heard. Generations later, her truth still challenged comfort. She did not fit neatly into history. She disrupted it. She forced people to face contradictions, to examine who was included and who was left out. Her life demanded that America look at itself honestly. She had lived through slavery, through war, through false freedom, and she had never stopped believing in the possibility of better. Her legacy was not perfection. It was persistence, she taught, that progress is built by those willing to endure discomfort, but those willing to stand alone by those willing to speak. When silence feels safer, women found courage in her story, especially those told they were too much, too loud, too strong. She reminded them that strength is not something to hide. She reminded them that dignity does not need permission. Her face, often misunderstood, had been her anchor. It gave her courage to walk into hostile spaces, to speak truth, to power, to trust that her suffering had purpose. She did not ask the world to like her, only to hear her, and hearing her meant facing injustice. That is why her story still matters in times when voices are dismissed, when rights are questioned, when progress feels fragile. Her life stands as evidence that one voice can shift the weight of history, that courage can grow from suffering, that truth spoken with love and firmness can endure. She was not perfect, she was human, but her humanity was her strength. She did not rise because the world was ready, she rose because she was, and in rising she lifted others. Her story is not only about the past, it is about now. It asks us who is being silenced today, whose pain is being ignored, whose truth is being dismissed. It challenges us to answer differently, to listen more closely, to speak more bravely, to act more justly. Sojourner Truth did not leave instructions. She left an example of what it means to live aligned with truth. Her voice still calls, not loudly, but clearly. It calls us to courage, to honesty, to responsibility. Journey she began did not end with her life. It continues in every stand taken, in every truth spoken, and it waits for those willing to carry it forward. The story comes to its quiet close, not with an ending, but with an inheritance, because some lives do not conclude, they continue. Sojourner Truth left the world without riches, without monuments, raised in her lifetime without comfort at the end, but she left behind something far more powerful. She left behind permission. Permission to speak, permission to stand, permission to exist without apology. She had walked a path no one prepared for her, a path carved through suffering, through faith, through courage, and by walking it, she made it possible for others to follow. Her life reminds us that power does not always look like crowns or titles. Sometimes power looks like endurance, like refusing to disappear, like telling the truth when it costs you everything. She never waited for approval. She never waited for the world to be ready. She became ready herself. She taught that voice is not given. It is claimed, that dignity is not granted. It is lived, that truth does not need decoration. It only needs courage. Even now, her question still breathes, ain't I a woman? It lives in classrooms where young girls question their worth. It lives in workplaces where voices are ignored. It lives in streets where justice is demanded. It lives wherever someone dares to ask to be seen. Her life asks us something in return. What will you do with your voice? Will you silence it to stay safe, or will you let it speak even when it trembles? Will you look away from injustice, or will you stand even when standing is lonely? She shows us that bravery is not the absence of fear, it is movement in spite of it. She shows us that truth does not belong to the powerful, it belongs to the brave. Her story is not meant to be admired from a distance. It is meant to be carried into conversations, into choices, into moments where silence feels easier than honesty. She reminds us that change often begins quietly, with one woman, one voice, one step. She was born into chains, but she refused to let chains define her. She transformed pain into purpose, suffering into strength, silence into song. She did not ask the world to save her, she saved herself, and in doing so she showed others how. Sojourner Truth, a woman once owned, a voice once denied, became a queen, not by ruling, but by speaking, and her reign did not end. It lives on in every truth spoken with courage, in every soul that refuses to be erased. This is her legacy, not finished, not fading, still walking, still speaking, still asking the world to listen. Her presence did not vanish with time, it settled, it rooted itself deep inside the soil of memory, even when her name was not spoken. Her spirit moved quietly through generations, in moments of doubt, in moments of fear, in moments when speaking felt dangerous. Her courage resurfaced. Women who never knew her face yet felt her strength stood taller because she once stood. They carried burdens. She understood silence, dismissal, invisible pain. And when they spoke with echoes of her voice. History often forgets, but truth remembers. Her story survived not because it was recorded perfectly, but because it was needed by those told to wait, needed by those told to be patient, needed by those told their time had not come. She taught that waiting can become another form of chains, that justice delayed grows heavier, That silence grows sharper, her life became a lesson passed quietly from mother to daughter, from teacher to student, from soul to soul. She showed that faith does not mean submission, it means trusting your purpose, even when the path is cruel. She showed that strength can be gentle and gentleness can be unbreakable. There were seasons when her name was pushed aside, when her contributions were minimized, when history chose simpler stories, yet her question survived. Ain't I a woman? It refused to disappear because it was never meant to. It was meant to return again and again. Whenever humanity forgot its own reflection, she did not live to see equality. She did not live to see justice fulfilled, but she lived to plant something stronger than certainty, hope rooted in truth. She understood something many never do, that change does not always arrive in your lifetime. Sometimes your role is to prepare the ground, to endure the storm, to speak so others can live louder. Her sacrifice was not in vain, because voices rose after hers, voices that demanded rights, voices that demanded recognition, voices that refused to shrink. Each of them carried a piece of her courage. She stands among those rare souls who turn suffering into service, who turn pain into permission. Her legacy is not heavy, it is steady. It does not shout, it stands, and it asks it quietly. Will you stand too? Will you speak? When your voice shakes, will you walk? When the road is long, will you choose truth? Even when it costs comfort, she invites us into responsibility, not guilt, not fear, responsibility to see, to listen, to act. Sojourner. Truth did not seek immortality, yet she became timeless, because truth spoken with courage never dies. It moves, it waits, it rises, and as long as there is injustice, as long as there are voices unheard, as long as there are women questioning their worth, her spirit remains present, not as history, but as a call to courage, a call to honesty, a call to stand. And the journey continues. The journey slows not because the truth grows weak, but because the body grows tired. There comes a moment when even the strongest spirit rests, when the road becomes quiet, when the voice that carried so far becomes gentle. Sojourner. Truth reached that moment. Her steps softened, her hands no longer carried the weight they once did. Her breath slowed with the years she had endured. She had given everything, her strength, her youth, her safety, her voice, and she asked for nothing in return. The world around her kept moving. Progress continued unevenly. Justice remained unfinished. She watched from a distance, not with bitterness, but with knowing. She understood that some battles are inherited, passed from one generation to the next. She had done her part in quiet moments. She reflected on the life she had lived. She remembered the child taken from her mother, the young woman beaten for not understanding the mother whose child was stolen, the woman who stood alone in court. She remembered fear, and how it lost its power. She remembered silence, and how it broke. She did not regret the pain, because it had shaped her purpose. As her body weakened, her spirit remained calm. She was not afraid of leaving, because she had already given the world what she came to give. Her voice softened, but it never disappeared. When the end came, it came quietly. No crowds, no speeches, no recognition, just rest. She left this world the same way she entered it, without ceremony. But unlike her beginning, she was no longer unseen. She was carried in memory, in words, in courage. The world did not stop when she left, but it was changed because she had lived. Her absence felt gentle, like the hush after a long storm. There was sadness, but also gratitude, because she had shown what it means to endure without losing dignity, to suffer without surrendering truth, to speak without hatred. She had turned tragedy into testimony, and as her story fades into silence, it leaves behind something soft, something fragile, something powerful, a reminder that even the quietest ending can belong to a life that shook the world. She was born in chains, she lived in truth, she rested in peace. And though her voice no longer speaks aloud, it is still heard in the spaces where courage begins, in the moments when someone chooses to speak, in the hearts that refuse to forget. This is how her story ends, not with noise, but with meaning. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. These stories are shared to remind us that no one should feel unseen or unheard. Your support helps keep these voices alive.